on to calendar item number 5.
Calendar item number 5, 170400 ZMK and 170401 ZRK.
These applications submitted by YYY Brooklyn, New York LLC seek zoning map and zoning text amendments to change an R6 district to a C6-4 district enlargement of the special downtown Brooklyn district, and to designate the rezoning area as a mandatory inclusionary housing area. A total approximately 262 dwelling units would be built in buildings containing 21 and 23 stories. There would also be retail space and parking for 44 vehicles in an enclosed garage. Community Board 2 approved this application on June 26 with conditions. Would Nora Martins, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application.
Hi, good evening. Nora Martins from Ackerman LLP, Land Use Council, representing the applicant for this ULURP matter tonight. I'm joined by Ari Afgang from Afgang Architects, a project architect. I'll be doing the first part of the presentation, and then he will take over to explain in more detail about the proposed building design. Also with us, we have Jorge Madruga from MAD Equities, which is one of the partners in the development team, and also Ed Brown from Team Brown Consultant, who's working with the development team as a jobs consultant for local hiring and job training. So as you mentioned, the site is at 202-208 Tillery Street. Wait, which way do I click? Right. Thank you. So as you can see from this land use and area map, just orient you to the site. The project area, which is the rezoning area, is located on the corner of Tillery Street and Prince Streets, just south of Tillery Street. It's includes the development site, which is lot 100, which is the L-shaped site in the middle of the rezoning area. The corner property, lot 100, and then a small portion of lot 1, which is the adjacent Ingersoll Houses NYCHA housing development to the east. This aerial photo just provides further context for the project area. You can see the corner property, which is included within the rezoning but not part of the development site, is an 8-story building. It's currently a community facility occupied as homeless housing, operated by 2 different nonprofits under contract with the city. Then there is the development site, 5-story self-storage. It's American storage. You've probably seen it on driving on the BQE. And then the adjacent Ingersoll houses, which are range from 7 to 11 stories. And then to the west, you have downtown Brooklyn across Prince Street and that 30 to 40 story typical downtown Brooklyn density. A few photos of the development site. The lot area is about 19,523 square feet. It's currently located in an R6 zoning district. It's been R6 since 1961. The permitted uses are residential community facilities, so the existing self-storage is actually a non-conforming use in the R6 zoning district. Proposed zoning actions here are a zoning map amendment to extend, and I'll show you a zoning change map shortly, the existing C6-4 downtown Brooklyn special district zoning that's located directly across Prince Street. You can see here from the proposed zoning change map on the left is the existing zoning. You can see the rezoning area is zoned R6, and then the proposed zoning map, which extends the C6-4 zoning district as well as the special downtown Brooklyn district across the project area. In addition to the zoning map amendment, we're also seeking several text amendments. One is a designation of a mandatory inclusionary housing area, coterminous with the project area. That would be option 1, which requires 25% of residential floor area to be affordable at an average of 60% AMI, with at least 10% at or below 40% AMI. Also seeking changes to the special downtown Brooklyn district maps to include the project area within the special district, and also within the height limitation area, which has a height restriction of 400 feet. This would, I'm going to turn it over to Ari, but this would facilitate the development of a 2-tower mixed-use residential development with a commercial ground floor, would revitalize this corner with all of the associated pedestrian and facade and streetscape improvements, and would also add, would be 262 units with 25% of the floor area affordable, approximately 79 affordable units.
Good evening. My name is Ari Olfgang. I'm principal of Olfgang Architects, and I'm very happy to be here to present this exciting project this evening. I'm actually grateful to be going near the end of the presentation tonight because it was interesting to hear all the presentations before us and the requests, the questions and everything else. And sitting next to my client, Jorge, it was quite a conversation we had about things that I've been barking about forever. And I think that you helped push me over the edge on quite a few things here, and I'm happy about that. So as Nora mentioned, we're proposing 2 buildings for a total of 262 apartments. Of those 262 apartments, 79 units will be permanently affordable, as would be required through the MIH program. Since the adoption of MIH, I've been personally involved in 6 rezonings. We're working on 12 more right now, all of which will be providing much-needed affordable housing throughout the city, and we're very happy to be involved in this one right here in Brooklyn.
And this is MIH option 1 or 2?
Well, option 1. Option 1. And the distribution of the units will also be, I would say, driven by market forces. So we're proposing approximately 25% studios, 45% one-bedroom apartments, 15% 2s, and 15% 3s. That's uniform between both buildings, and it's reflected both on the non-MIH units and the MIH units alike.
And have you supplied that particular list of
I don't know what's
distribution?
been supplied, but yes, it should be in the presentation. We also have cellar-level parking. The total residential square footage on the project is approximately 220,000 square feet, and the total commercial first-floor space is approximately 14,000 square feet. So the ground floor use, as I mentioned, will be comprised of both commercial space, residential lobbies. Additionally, an entrance to the parking. It's an interesting site because of the way that it's split around the neighbor, as you can see here. There really is no way, with the contextual rules of the Quality Housing Program, to connect the 2 towers. So it will have to be 2 distinct buildings. We intend to have some connection subgrade at the cellar level behind the towers in order to share amenities. But we're planning a host of amenities for these buildings that will be shared between the MIH units and the market rate units also, including a gym. We're going to have community space, outdoor space on the roof, outdoor space on the roof of the retail space in the back. We have a host of security measures that we intend to provide in all of our buildings, and we will here also, including security cameras and ample lighting in public areas. We're going to have full-time doorman on both buildings. So we have a list of things, and sustainability is also very important. While it's not graphically represented, this is a complicated site, and I can show you why. Here's our site plan. So if I could step away for the mic.
You can take the mic with you, actually.
I don't feel like a rock star. I could take this with me. All right, so as you can see here, we have an out parcel, which Nora mentioned, and these are our 2 towers fronting on Prince and on Tillery. So we've spent a lot of time dealing with the nuance of zoning, with the downtown Brooklyn district, with the maximum heights, with the floor-to-floor heights. We want to provide at least 9-foot ceilings in all of the apartments all the way up, so that's going to require 10 feet floor-to-floor. We also want to give 16 feet floor-to-floor to the retail to make sure that it's a desirable space to bring in a good tenant. But we haven't quite had a chance to fully flesh out the sustainable elements graphically. I could tell you what we're thinking about, as we've done on quite a few buildings with Jorge in Brooklyn. Solar panels and green roof are both on the agenda. It'll be some combination of those 2 things, also with the incorporated outdoor space for the tenants. So as you can see on this first image here, we have these areas that have this trestle, which would provide for shading. That's a possible armature for putting solar panels, some sort of growth of greenery on top. And we're also studying, we haven't quite completed the study, but we have a consultant work on the possibility for the swales at the sidewalk in place of the regular tree pits. We think it's important. The problem is we don't have a lot of frontage. This is the frontage of the neighbor's building. So our frontage would really just be this piece and that piece. we can't get permission to do any sort of improvements on the sidewalk in front of the neighbor's building. But we're going to be looking at all those things. We're also going to be, since there's not an affordable housing job per se, like the first two applications today, we're not mandated to do Enterprise Green Communities, but we're going to be voluntarily subscribing to the Enterprise Green Communities program and looking at NYSERDA for possible grants. So that'll all play into these decisions about solar, green roof, and stormwater management. We also have, other measures that we include in all buildings. As you all know, energy code has gotten pretty strict, but we try to make all of our buildings exceed energy code. There are certain benefits to that in the zoning now. So a building like this, at this height, with a masonry facade and punch windows, where we have a pretty decent zoning deduction that we can take if we provide a fair amount of insulation above and beyond what's required in the energy code. That's something you can't do it on a glass building, but you can do it on a contextual building like this. One of the reasons why we're proposing a building that's mainly cast stone, some metal panel, it allows us to have that cavity insulation on the entire building. And we in turn get a deduction of the facade, a few inches around the whole perimeter from the zoning area. We are limited here by zoning area, as you all know, with the inclusionary maximum. We're also going to have on-site bicycle storage. We're going to have what we're considering low-flow faucets, toilet shower heads, very low-maintenance facade. That's another thing with masonry here, as opposed to some of the buildings you see. We've seen a lot of buildings along the BQE that are just subject to that constant exhaust from the trucks and the cars. It's particularly metal buildings, metal panel buildings. In a very short amount of time, they're covered in stains from the exhaust. So we're thinking about a full masonry facade, brick, cast stone, with only accents of metal that would allow it to be more maintenance-free and to look very nice going into the future. Recycling bins on every floor, Energy Star windows, very efficient boilers. The building would have P-tax. They're going to be hot water P-tax. Any place where we don't have the solar panels or the green roof will be low albedo roofing, including paver areas. We're also very careful with light pollution. Not that in this area, I guess on the NYCHA side, it's pretty important. Facing the BQE, it might not be too critical, but we're going to make sure we don't have any sort of obnoxious exterior lighting that's lighting areas of the neighborhood where people are trying to get a good night's sleep, and you have these sort of accent lights, which you see on some modern buildings. I actually think I rushed through everything, and I didn't miss a thing. So that's our presentation for the description of the building, and of course, we're here to answer questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, did you say you're a passive house architect?
No,
Okay.
I'm not Passive House. We've designed a Passive House building. It's not yet built, and we did it in conjunction with Stephen Winter Associates as a consultant. So I could at some point.
Where, in Brooklyn?
No, that's in Harlem. In Harlem, we've.
I'll forgive you.
We're looking at it. The first architect who was up here, he made a good point. Masonry is very challenging for Passive House because of the conduction of the brick ties
Unless
through the
it's
insulation. Stucco is stucco. Stucco, I think, you do a building this size and all stucco, it's going to look like someone built a refrigerator and took off the stainless steel. That's what these Passive House buildings tend to look like. At a smaller scale, it's very, I don't want to say easy, but it's easier to do. You can get more creative with the facade. At a scale like this, you want to have something masonry, something that's going to last. And until Passive House addresses this issue of the brick ties passing through the insulation, it's challenging.
So, regarding the intended affordable housing units, what is the qualifying income range for prospective household based on household size?
Sure. So as I mentioned, this project would be compliant with MIH option 1. So that would require an average of 60% AMI, 10% at 40% AMI, no more than 3 income bands, and no income band higher than 130% AMI. So just by way of example, Ari gave you the unit distributions, which would range from studio to 3-bedroom. At the 40% AMI band, a 1-bedroom would be 590. A 2-bedroom would be 718. Oh, sorry, I missed. Studio would be 462. And a 3-bedroom would be 821. That would be the monthly rent. And at 60% AMI, studio would be 748. A 1-bedroom would be 948. 2-bedroom would be 1,148. And a 3-bedroom would be 1,317.
And what's the distribution of units by bedroom size?
By bedroom size, it's approximately 26% of the units would be studios, 44% would be one bedroom, and 30% would be two or three bedroom. And that distribution would be proportional between the inclusionary housing units and the market rate units. So it wouldn't be all of the inclusionary housing units wouldn't be one bedroom and studio. There would be an equal number of 2 and 3 beds that are affordable.
And so I just want to make sure that the unit mix discussion as far as favoring what would be the studio and one bedroom concerns what would be our office, with the understanding that other than senior housing, which is a very high in demand population that seeks what would be the one bedroom and studio, but don't have the income bracket qualification, unless they are going to be Section 8 based units to support the senior moving into an affordable housing unit like this. Affordable housing units that favors more 2 and 3 bedrooms as opposed to favoring studio and one bedroom, which is 70% of the project. A mix where it could be 50-50 as opposed to 70-30.
Right, so this 70-30 breakdown is reflective of the market and actually is more generous than some projects are on 2 and 3 bedroom units. The breakdown of the affordable units would be in conjunction with HPD's mandatory inclusionary housing division. They would have to approve a different
Is HPT
breakdown.
Here? Okay. Could you just express on the record whether or not the 2 and 3 bedroom is not part of the MIH?
Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa Casano. I'm from HPD's Division of Special Needs Housing. So we typically do not deal with the inclusionary, but typically they do like to see a distribution that matches the rest of the market rate units in the building. So we'd like to see a proportional distribution. Thus, if the building was 20% 2 bedrooms, we'd want to see 20% of the inclusionary units be reflected as 2 bedrooms.
Right, and so I appreciate what would be that explanation, but that's not what I'm asking. Is it possible to see in the MIH what would be more 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, as opposed to majority studio, 1 bedroom?
Yeah, so I understand what you're asking. The way that we are interpreting MIH right now is to make sure that the affordable units are proportional in distribution to the units of the building. So I believe what you're asking is if could we skew those units to family size?
I'm not saying skew, because if the market rate were 50-50, one and studio and 1 bedrooms, 50% 2 and 3 bedrooms, then the MIH would be reflective of such, correct? And so if we flip that and we say we need to meet the demand of, how many families are in the homeless shelter system?
We have over 60,000 people today.
And how many are, what is the average family size?
That I do not know off the top of my head.
And so if you can conclude where I'm going with, the more 1 bedroom studio apartments we're approving, we're never going to see a dent in any of the work we're trying to achieve with MIH. And so I'm not too sure what the city of New York interpreting anything other than you were the authors of the MIH.
Yes, understood. And when a project is funded under an HPD loan program, most of our affordable housing programs do have set distributions of units that skew to the family size units, because we recognize there's a huge need for affordable housing of families. MIH is a little bit tricky because many of the units in this building are in fact market rate units that will have no HPD restriction. So I I hear you. I will take your considerations back. At this time, though, the way we interpret MIH is that if the market rate units are a certain distribution, we'd like the MIH units to reflect that distribution as well. And certainly, we rely on community processes like this one to call for more family units in buildings where the majority of units are market rate.
And so, the consideration for this application to have more 2 and 3 bedrooms favors the application. You're not saying that MIH is only restricted to 30%. 70%, 30%. Majority studio and 1 bedrooms versus 2 and 3 bedrooms. Mm-hmm.
I can answer it this way. We designed probably, I don't want to quote the number of units, about half of my office designs exclusively affordable housing, low-income housing. The other half works on 70-30s like this. In Brooklyn, through all the market rate buildings we've designed, Bushwick, Williamsburg, not so much downtown, but Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Gowanus, I don't think there's 1 3-bedroom apartment.
Yes, there is.
I'm saying in my buildings, because my developers on those buildings, and I'm getting this, so my developers in those buildings, they really are constantly trying to just get the most number of units.
All right, with all due respect,
Right.
I represented Williamsburg Bushwick. And part of our frustration in Williamsburg Bushwick was exactly what you just said.
Well, I know. So there's a second half. So here, when we started looking at this project, we specifically wanted to address the issue, and we're almost paralleling the HPD requirements for the distribution. Well, we're closer than the new ELA term sheets require, I think it is 30% 2s and 3s. And so we're trying to mimic however we can. So as much as I know it's not a great answer, but there at 15% 3s and 15% 2s, while it might not be as far as we could go, it's a step towards addressing the issue of families, of larger families. And that's what we're trying to do. But we certainly can look at it again. It's sort of driven by the marketing a little bit, but we feel that we're at least trying to take that step towards the multi-bedroom units.
And so your application right now, reflecting what is the majority of the affordable units, studio and 1 bedrooms, could be re-evaluated.
It certainly could be, but as I said, the 15% 3s and 15% 2s we feel is already a step towards more larger units as compared to the larger market in Brooklyn.
The larger market being who?
Being the predominant distribution that's proposed by developers in strictly market rate buildings. So this building, it could be 0 3s, and we feel that it's required here, so that's why we're trying to take that step to that 15% 3s.
But our office would never accept 0.
That's fine, and we would never propose 0.
And so moving beyond that point, what we're trying to understand is this preference, and going back to what is each developer saying it's HPD's requirements of what is 30% 2 and 3 bedrooms. So I'm trying to understand whether or not HPD is saying you can't do more than 30% 2 and 3 bedrooms.
What do they say you can't do? They don't say that.
So I just want to be clear here. This is a primarily market rate development. So where our unit requirements and restrictions on unit sizes really come into play is when a project is accessing financing through HPD. So they're using one of our loan programs, in which case we do state that there is a preference in various term sheets towards larger units and that we require a minimum percentage. Minimum, correct, not a maximum.
Just want to make sure we understand the language of minimum.
Understood. But to be clear, this project so far is not proposing accessing one of those loan programs. And so in a case where it's a private development who is using MIH, we typically do not weigh in at this stage of the game on the unit distribution. We rely on our community boards and the community process to communicate those concerns to developers.
Okay. So we are addressing what is raising our concern regarding the need for a distribution of 50%, 50%, so that the primary need is not weighing onto what is a population of majority, 70% of the units being one-bedroom and studios.
We can take a look at that.
I appreciate that.
And we will get back to you. I would just to clarify again, this project is not receiving any public financing.
Right.
All of this affordable housing would be subsidized by the market rate building, market rate units. In that event, you know, this does require a complicated feasibility analysis as to the types of units that would make this project work. And there is always, while we understand the need for large units, I think everyone in here would like a larger apartment. I think people need them. Families need larger apartments. It also means less apartments. So that is a countervailing consideration, and they need to get built. So here we have a non-publicly assisted project looking to build nearly 80 affordable units, 30% of which will be 2s and 3 bedrooms. So we found that to be a more than respectable proposal, and but we hear what you're saying, and we will take a look and see if we can get closer to that number.
If you could look at the section in the zoning, which talks about the bedroom mix for these units, we know the zoning was written carefully to make sure that we didn't have a lot of small units compared to the market rate, unless there was, say, a special funding for, say, supportive units or elderly units, and therefore you could do a lot of studios compared to the market rate. But there's a section in there that talks about doing more of a 50-50 mix as an option available, and I believe that's an as-of-right option so that you don't have to mirror the market rate units, and you can choose to use that mix that gets you more of a 50-50. So you should double-check
We'll
that
take a look
section,
at
but
that.
our belief is you can deviate from the market units as long as you're doing more bedrooms, not less. So if you give us less than 79 units, but they're more of a quality for us in that same floor area, that may be more beneficial to our constituents.
We'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Given community concerns regarding displacement and the prevalence of rent burden households, could you please identify the marketing strategies, such as designating one of the community affordable housing nonprofits as the affordable housing administering agent? And who will that be if it's been selected? And will they also administer what would be the tenant selection process in order to ensure the highest level of participation from Community District 2, including preference for residents of Ingersoll houses who are overcrowded?
So yes, with regard to the nonprofit administering agent for the lottery, that they have not been selected yet, but we would look for someone local in the neighborhood and, of course, open to suggestions from the Borough President and the Community Board. We would have a 50% preference for Community District 2, and while that is the maximum preference for the Community District, and we can't have a stated preference for the Ingersoll houses, given the adjacency, we would institute a more aggressive marketing strategy that would effectively increase the number of applicants from the immediate local area, thereby increasing their opportunity to be selected in the lottery, which would include working with the Tenants Association of the Ingersoll houses, with whom we've had several discussions regarding this project, working with Community District 2 to make sure that people are notified, that they are aware of the lottery, and that, as you've mentioned earlier tonight, that they have the technical assistance necessary to be able to apply for and be eligible for these units.
I appreciate. And Ingersoll houses, it's our understanding, as far as the association is concerned, and Community Board 2 had called for community amenities such as a daycare center or an urgent care clinic. Has that been discussed as far as retail use is concerned?
Yes, absolutely. As already mentioned, there's almost 14,000 square feet of retail in the base, and we have had active discussions with the Ingersoll Tenants Association regarding what types of local retail uses would be a useful amenity to the Ingersoll houses development, which is, again, a large adjacent development. And daycare and health-related use, such as an urgent care, were both cited at the Community Board and by the Tenants Association. Both uses we're very open to providing. The developer has daycare facilities in several of his other developments, and that's something that is comfortable with and thinks would be a really valuable amenity for the residents.
And is the commercial ground floor going to be a commercial condo unit?
I don't believe so. That would be maintained and rented.
And so it's lease only?
Yes,
The residential units are also lease as well?
yes, it's a
Tenant
rental
lease.
building.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a rental. And as far as the community facility use for the retail space, in addition to retail commercial spaces, there's no community facility use?
No,
Or it's
I mean,
all
the
incorporated?
medical use can be classified as either commercial or community facility use. So that could be a potential community facility use in the space. The ground
you're not
floor,
u-
if there is a community facility tenant,
But you're
in the
not
area.
using that as part of your FAR?
no, you actually, in this proposed zoning district, in the C64, you get a higher FAR for residential than for community facility, which is different than most zoning districts. So there's no additional floor area available for community facility.
Okay. Given the development site sharing property boundaries with Ingersoll Houses campus, what steps would be integrated to address concerns expressed by the tenant association that might enhance the space between the buildings?
Yes, so I think, look at the site plan, you can see the adjacent areas to the Ingersoll houses. There is the rear of our building, which would be designed so that it doesn't look like the rear of a building, so that it's appealing to look at from Ingersoll. We would be enclosing, it's currently a refuse collection area for the Ingersoll houses, be enclosing that and providing refrigerated refuse containers, because that is actually a problem we heard about several times, that especially in the summer months, it's unsightly, and I mean, I think the odors keep people from opening their windows, which is awful in the summer months. So that's one proposed improvement. Also, on the portion of the property that fronts on Tillery Street, which is currently used as a loading and parking area for, it's NYCHA property, but it's used as a loading and parking area for the self-storage facility. That would be proposed to be landscaped. The retail on the ground floor would open out onto that area to establish a connection to the Ingersoll campus. There would be passive recreation, plantings, seating, places you could play, checkers or cards or sit and eat lunch. All of that, of course, is subject to approval by NYCHA, but I think they would be amenable, and we've discussed these improvements with the Tenants Association.
Just to be clear, the improvements you just referred to, are they going to be at the cost of the applicant?
That would have to be discussed, but I think that would be the idea.
Okay. Just wanted to
Oh
understand.
yeah, it benefits everybody. I think it's something that the applicant would want. Yes.
And so I wanted to just make sure the discussions are active and progressing with NYCHA. I'm not too sure if they've formalized this in writing. Have you proposed this in writing?
It's been proposed in writing to the Tenants Association, and they've also written a letter in support with these commitments that we've made to them. It's something that we will raise with NYCHA, but at this point, those improvements couldn't be made until after the development is built, so we're a few years out here. But it's absolutely, as we near the end of this process, is the conversation we would begin as we're preparing the real construction and development plans for the project.
Has a letter informing what would be the chair and its board members of NYCHA on the proposal of having access to this?
I believe NYCHA is aware of this,
In
and there is a
writing.
license agreement right now between NYCHA and the current property owner for the use of that property. So they're, aware of the status of that piece of property, and
But as
NYCHA is
far as-
aware of this project. We don't have anything
I'm
in
sorry.
writing saying they approve
If you
these
can just
exact
allow me
improvements.
to ask so
Sure.
that I can get a
Sure.
clear answer.
Sure.
Is there in writing to NYCHA what is the proposal of investing in the landscaping, seating investment
No,
that's being proposed here?
no, not that
Okay.
I'm aware of.
Can you please put that in writing,
Sure.
send it to the chairwoman, CC us, so that we have a clear understanding as to what you're claiming on the record today? Thank you.
Absolutely.
It is Borough President Adams' policy to promote the use of sustainable and renewable energies resources, and I know that you've gone into what would be some of the expectations of meeting some of those standards, the energy consultant that you're going to be hiring, and expecting to incorporate what would be passive house design, solar panels. I believe you mentioned blue and green, or just green?
Not blue, just green roof.
Just green roof, and the possibility of bioswales, frontage of the two properties, considering that you have no jurisdiction over where the corner property sits. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was recapturing what you had mentioned. The last question I have is related to quality jobs and just ensuring what would be the inclusion of MWBE participation and local business enterprises in the process of construction on-site, as well as post-construction. So I know I remember hearing you say there's going to be superintendent and lobby position, and security, I believe. And are those, in addition to those jobs, what other particular jobs will there be?
Sure. I'd like to have Ed Brown from Team Brown
Thank you.
Consulting speak to that. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Deputy Borough President. My name is Ed Brown. I'm the president of Team Brown Consulting, and we're the workforce development consultant on the job. And you know, we have a relationship, and basically on the track record that we've already been conducting in the neighborhood, we're actually going to duplicate what we've done on other projects in reference to getting local residents hired on these jobs. You have to forgive me, I'm kind of tired. I was sitting there for a very long time. I'm so
completely
sorry.
understand.
I'm so sorry.
I
I was
completely
dozing off a
understand.
couple of times. But so we're basically going to duplicate what we've been doing in reference to hiring local residents, primarily Ingersoll, but we're also going to work with Farragut and Walt Whitman houses. And they're going to be skilled trade construction jobs. There's going to be non-skilled labor jobs on the site. And we're going to work with the general contractor to find out what's needed in what areas, what trades, and we're going to provide local residents on these jobs. And as far as sustainability, just to give you one example, on the Dock Street project, Two Trees, and the BAM South project, we have, you know, people who started off with no skills at all, who are now skilled carpenters, electricians, et cetera, and basically they move from job to job. So we have people, the BAM South site is winding down now, so we have people actually being shifted over to Domino, which is, I believe, your neighborhood. And
Certainly is.
also going to be shifted over to the Cadman Library site that's about to begin. They're actually in ground now, doing the foundation. And as far as working with the residents of Ingersoll, you know, I hold this dear to my heart because that's where I was born and raised. And I'm the former TA president. I was TA president for 6 years. And so I have my hand on the ground as far as the needs of the community. And we also have Mr. Anthony Sosa here this evening, who's now the current president. And we're actually working together to make sure that we kind of change the game in this neighborhood because, as you know, Ingersoll and Whitman and Farragut are surrounded by developments. And I must commend Mr. Madruga and, you know, Mad Equities for reaching out because, as Mr. Sosa can attest to, so many developments have taken place around Ingersoll, Whitman, and Farragut, and residents haven't been getting jobs. So we're on top of it, and, you know, I'm going on the record to say that I'm going to work diligently with them to make sure that residents get these jobs.
And as far as Team Brown Consulting services, do you track what would be the work as you progress? What would be MWBE participation? Or MWB is not part of the services that you provide.
Well, we do provide that service, but not
Okay.
on this particular project. We're doing workforce development on this project.
Okay. And so MWBE participation is going to be tracked as part of this project by someone else?
It's not required to be tracked for this project, not receiving any financing. The developer, who also acts as general contractor, is an MWBE, and they do seek MWBE participation to the greatest extent possible. But I think on this project, the real focus has been, given the adjacency to a huge workforce in need, that real local workforce participation.
And as far as the number of jobs anticipated for this project, Mr. Brown was making the presentation as far as what would be training, workforce opportunity. Do you know exactly how many anticipated positions there will be for this construction site?
Not currently,
yet.
but once we sit down with the general contractor and we find out what areas and where the needs are, we'll have a number.
Okay, so I want to thank the development team for the presentation. I want to just call at this moment members of the public who have signed up. I'd like to start with Mike Bradley from 32BJ. This is Ari.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mike Bradley. I live in Brooklyn Community Board 2. I work as a concierge at a residential building, and I'm a member of 32BJ. I'm here on behalf of the 85,000 32BJ members who maintain, clean, and provide concierge services in office and residential buildings across the city, including at projects like the one developer, Med Equities, has proposed for Tillery and Prince Street. Over 30,000 32BJ members live in Brooklyn, and we are concerned about the crisis of affordability facing our borough. The cost of living is going up, while 1 in 4 residents of Brooklyn remains in poverty, and Brooklyn's average wages remain the lowest of the 5 boroughs. This affordability crisis cannot be solved with new development if development only brings more low-wage jobs. Unfortunately, Med Equities has not committed to provide good building service jobs at Tillery and Prince Street if the project was approved. We also believe it's important to hire local residents for permanent handy person, concierge, and porter positions. With so many other parts of life uncertain and unstable, residents of Brooklyn need stable employment to lift up their families. We encourage the Borough President to vote no on this project, and we encourage the Borough President to recommend that Med Equities commit to good building service jobs that pay family-sustaining wage, prevailing wage, as well as to local hire for building service positions if the project goes forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Thank you very much. Mr. Brown, Mr. Brown, Ed, can you just go back? I just wanted to ask you, as far as your workforce training and placement, does it include what would be building services post-construction?
Not currently, but it's something that, since I'm hearing it a lot
Right.
now, we're going to start looking into that.
And has, in your experience with the projects that you've just referred to, BAM South, Dock Street, and now currently Domino, has there been a discussion with 32BJ?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
If you can just reach out
Okay.
just to see what or how they're working with, what is training and placement of individuals from Farragut Houses and Ingersoll, to understand whether or not there's a gap being filled
Yeah.
for training in building services
Sure, sure.
from those particular houses.
I'll get right on that.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Is that it?
Yes, I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Emmanuel, forgive me, Jamor? Oh, okay. I saw that, Ari, for you, okay. So we're good there. And Mike was the last member of the public. If there are no other members of the public that are going to testify on this matter, I'd like to close item number 5 and move into item number 6.
Calendar item number 6, 170425-0Y.
The Department of City Planning proposes a citywide zoning text amendment to establish a special permit under the jurisdiction of the City Planning Commission for all new self-service storage development in the proposed designated areas, approximately 40% of the land area where such use is currently permitted as of right. Such areas are defined by their location within manufacturing districts, largely coinciding with industrial business zones, IBZs, and would be established as text maps. The primary intent of this proposal is to establish a framework to conduct a case-by-case, site-specific review to ensure that development of self-storage facilities does not occur on sites that should remain available to more job-intensive industrial uses. Existing self-storage facilities within the newly proposed designated areas would be able to continue operating as legal non-conforming uses. Self-storage would remain as an as-of-right use in C8 zoning district and in manufacturing districts outside of designated areas. Approximately 60% of the land area where such use is currently permitted as of right. Borough President Adams is aware that areas where self-storage would remain as of right includes areas that are being contemplated for rezoning to districts that would no longer permit self-storage, included more defined actions such as the prior calendar item, as well as might be the case for comprehensive proposals such as might be in the case of the northern section of Gowanus in Community District 6, the M. Crown study area of Community District 8, and certain corridors being considered by both Community Districts 9 and 17. Thank you. Would Amanda Iyer,
Yes.
the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank
I
you.
I admire your endurance.
Years in training.
Oh, wow. So my name is Amanda Iyer. I'm here from the Department of City Planning. I'm here joined tonight by my colleagues Winston van Engel, Alex Sommer, and Karenza Woods, and they have been leading DCP's efforts regarding the zoning text amendment here in the Borough of Brooklyn. I'm happy to go over the presentation, considering that I think most of the people who are here tonight have seen it entirely before. You can also interrupt me anytime. We can also go directly to the questions. We can do really as you please. So.
If you can go through the presentation, because we are actually having
I'm
a
sorry.
public viewing.
Okay, yes.
And it will continue to be accessible for the public.
Right.
So thank you.
Happy to. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I'm here tonight to present a proposed zoning text amendment. The proposal involves requiring a special permit for new self-storage facilities. And like many people, the city wants to support industrial jobs in IBZs, industrial business zones, which are the city's most active industrial areas. We understand that self-storage facilities have generated a lot of concern among communities and industrial advocates. And this proposal is aiming to strike a balance between protecting the city's most active industrial areas, which are the IBZs, and the real demand that exists in the city for self-storage, which is already limited as to where it can locate in New York City. This proposal originated in November 2015 when it was first announced as part of the 10-point industrial action plan. It was announced by the Office of the Mayor and the City Council Speaker, and the plan targeted New York City's industrial business zones as areas for employment growth and industrial innovation. The Industrial Action Plan has 3 main objectives. These are to protect industrial neighborhoods and incentivize development, and this is where the proposed limitations on self-storage come in. The second objective is to align city services to help industrial businesses start, grow, and thrive, and the third is to train the city's workforce, and a series of different City agencies are working on the different objectives of the 10-point industrial action plan, and the proposed restrictions on self-storage specifically were part of DCP's work program. Industrial city, IBZs, they were first established in 2006, and in a process that involved city agencies, elected officials, and the public. And they are New York City's most active industrial area. So we have seen that over 68% of the employment in these areas is industrial, and that these are areas that are critical for a range of industries, going from wholesale, construction, manufacturing, warehousing, and other industrial businesses. And we have also seen that since 2010, industrial employment has been growing in these areas. So the Industrial Action Plan that was announced in 2015 builds on a series of existing policies, and that belongs to the tax incentives that are provided to industrial businesses, the service providers, the IBZ service providers, the pledge to not rezone IBZs to residential, and all of these actions together support economic growth in IBZs. So the proposed restrictions on self-storage make sense in the presence of an existing economic development policy and specific objectives that already exist for these IBZs. For the purpose of the zoning text amendment, we will call the IBZs designated areas in M districts. This is a technicality, but we are giving them a different name in order to distinguish between the tax program, which exists and is subject to state law, and we want to draw a distinction between IBZs as a tax program and what will be incorporated into the zoning resolution, and those will exist as similar, but they won't. What affects one boundary won't necessarily affect the other boundary, so that's why we are just calling them a different name. Essentially, the boundaries are almost exactly the same as the IBZ boundaries, really with the exception of the airport areas that have been carved out in Queens. Both JFK and LaGuardia airports are not part of the designated areas because those are not subject to the city zoning in any way, so it wouldn't make much sense. And so the proposed areas where this self-storage restriction would apply is in the 4 boroughs, except Manhattan. The industrial uses that the city desires in IBZs are either job-intensive, they're innovative, they provide utilities, or they support additional economic output. We think that the unregulated development of self-storage detracts from the city's long-term objectives for IBZs, and the 3 principal reasons are that self-storage in itself doesn't generate many jobs, it serves primarily households, and it also tends to occupy very large lots along designated truck routes or highways, which would often be optimal sites for more job-intensive industrial uses. In that sense, self-storage combines 3 characteristics: the fact that it's low job, not very job dense, it serves households, and it occupies these kinds of sites where we really think we could see industrial uses thrive that make it conflict with the city's economic development goals for IBZs. We think that restricting these facilities in IBZs is beneficial because we see that industrial businesses are having a hard time finding appropriate sites, and these large lots where self-storage typically gets developed are increasingly scarce. In IBZs, where industrial employment has been growing and an economic development policy is in place, we need to ensure that siting opportunities remain for industrial businesses. However, in developing this proposal, we also wanted to make sure that we didn't restrict self-storage elsewhere in the city, because we understand that there is a high demand for self-storage. It isn't for nothing that this use has been growing in the city. And we know that apartments in New York City are small, and that businesses also lease these units. These are some examples of self-storage facilities that we think that are located in IBZs and we think are lost opportunities for future industrial development. In the context of the existing economic development policies, we could have seen a more job-intensive industrial use potentially on these sites. Regarding self-storage in New York City, there are about 240 facilities. They are classified as a warehouse, use group 16 use, and they're currently permitted in all C8 and M districts. They're relatively dispersed in the city. As you can see, there are self-storage facilities in every borough, and they have also been developing in every borough, Manhattan included. They do have a characteristic of being developed along truck routes. As you can see, there's an overlay here of official truck routes, and they typically do follow that geography or these boundaries. I included another slide based on some of your questions that you sent. here's just a little bit more background on self-storage facilities. So they can be conversions or new construction. They used to be predominantly conversion and have become predominantly new construction. The median lot size for a self-storage facility is about 40,000 square feet, and newly built self-storage facilities since 2010, so this is the more recent kinds of self-storage facilities that have been developed, have a median built floor area of 80,000 square feet. So this is only for new construction, not conversion, because that's always a bit more complicated to figure out exactly how much square footage is there. But building floor areas range from the recently built ones range from 42,000 square feet to 200,000 square feet. They typically maximize the floor area ratio, so the height or the amount of stories really depends on the zoning district, but they have been developed in 1 FAR districts as well as 5 FAR districts, and typically range from as low as 1 story, they can be single story and built basements, up until 7 or 8 stories if that's what the FAR allows for. And I'm happy to provide these charts to you also afterwards. I know that there hasn't been previously in any documentation. This is a map of Brooklyn, as you know. In the areas in purple are the areas where we are proposing a self-storage restriction, and the areas in blue, orange, or red are other zoning districts where self-storage would still remain as of right. Over just about 1/4 or just over 1/4 of the existing self-storage facilities in Brooklyn are within the IBZ, so are within the areas where this special permit would apply. And yeah, overall in thinking about the effects of this proposal, we think that the effect on M and C8 districts outside of the IBZs would be relatively modest. First of all, they exist in many parts of Brooklyn and many parts of the city, so there wouldn't be a sudden concentration of self-storage facilities specifically because of this proposal. They are quite widely, MMCA districts are quite widely mapped. And also on average, about 1 out of 4 self-storage facilities has located in IBZs in the past 10 years, which also means that if any shift were to occur, it should be relatively modest in the extent, since there aren't that many self-storage facilities that get built on a yearly basis. But more detailed maps of the areas where this, the restriction would apply can be found in the website, and also in all of the applications that have been sent to the community boards and the borough boards too. Specifically, we're proposing a city planning commission special permit for the development of self-storage in designated areas in M districts, so in the IBZs, and we think that a special permit provides a case-by-case, site-specific review process, and this can ensure that a self-storage development doesn't represent a significant lost opportunity for the future development of a more job-intensive industrial business. We're proposing that these restrictions, the special permit, really only apply to self-storage and not to other warehouses or moving businesses. These other businesses tend to have more employees than self-storage, and they're an important part of what happens in IBZs, so it's not an objective to affect those other kinds of uses. Any special permit has specific criteria that are associated with granting the special permit, and what we're proposing is that a self-storage development should be permitted on sites that are not appropriate industrial business locations. Just as the rationale I explained, the findings mirror the rationale. The City Planning Commission, but then also the community boards, Borough President, and a City Council would evaluate if a lot or building would be appropriate for conforming industrial use. And then we would describe in much more detail considerations that could inform that decision, and the considerations would be based on zoning lot size, the configuration of the lot, proximity to truck routes. If the local street is narrow or wide, could it accommodate truck traffic? We would also want to know if there is a potential for conflict with surrounding uses. Are there perhaps grandfathered residential uses immediately adjacent to the site? If that's the case, we wouldn't necessarily want to facilitate an industrial development that likely would be more noxious than perhaps a self-storage facility. Is the proposed site contaminated? And if there is an opportunity for environmental remediation, and also whether there has been investment in comparable sites in the area, and if the buildings, are they occupied, are they vacant and abandoned? And these are the series of considerations that we are proposing for this special permit. Also, all existing self-storage facilities would be grandfathered and would remain conforming. So the special permit is subject to full ULURP review, and an applicant would have to show that a potential site is adequate for self-storage and impractical for an industrial business, as described just before for the considerations. ULURP, as you know, involves community board review, borough president review, and the city planning commission vote, and usually the council also votes on special permits. We estimate that the total length of the process is typically almost 2 years, but this also includes the preparation of the application, not just ULURP itself. We have gone through quite a lengthy process. It was first announced in 2015, as I said. We've developed the proposal. We had pre-scoping outreach in January and February, and a scoping meeting at late March. And in late May, the zoning text amendment was referred out, and we are currently in the community board, borough president, and borough board review. So the city planning commission public hearing is still upcoming and needs to be scheduled. In Brooklyn, this directly affected community boards 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 16, 17, and 18, and the referral period lasts for a few more days until July 30th. There is a lot more information also on our website, and well, you have our contact information, so please reach out anytime if you have questions.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I wanted to just go back to the slide where you showed the different years and the spike right there. Why do you believe there was a spike in 2016 for new storage facilities?
I don't know exactly. It is a growing industry, so it's not exactly surprising. The spike looks might look a bit. I think it's accentuated by the graphic. In the end, it doesn't represent. It represents less than 10 facilities, I believe. But yeah, why exactly there would be a spike?
You said it represents less than 10 facilities.
Yeah.
But those facilities are probably what would equate to the highest volume of square footage and FAR.
Yes, exactly. So. I mean, it does show the.
So that's the amount of industrial manufacturing space lost, even though it's less in sites, it's larger in building bulk.
So it's between 1 million and 1,200,000 square feet for that year. Whether industrial space was specifically lost due to these developments is hard to know. I didn't look into the specifics of what was before the self-storage facility. It's often hard to know the exact sequence of events. So I wouldn't go as far as saying that the self-storage facility was directly a cause would have directly caused the loss of industrial space. What we know is that they got built, and that there is a market demand for it, and we have seen continued demand, which is why this business is still expanding.
So you haven't seen, you have not studied what would be vacant land versus empty land, new construction, self-storage facilities versus existing buildings and manufacturing industrial land where existing structures were converted.
Yeah, we could look at that for these sites. This is a graphic that only has new construction. So either the site was entirely vacant before, which is an option. Either there was a building that was demolished, and that building could have been vacant, or it could have had a tenant. Those are the three scenarios that could have preceded essentially the construction of the self-storage facility.
Mm-hmm. So the self-storage facility client base includes small businesses that utilize these facilities for warehousing of products and storage of equipment based on affordability and availability, as opposed to standard warehouse facilities. What consideration is being given to possible indirect harm to such small businesses? Have you heard from the small business industry who warehouses in a self-storage facility as opposed to warehouse capacity in IBZ or M zone outside of the IBZ that is incorporated into their footprint of operation?
Right. We've received testimony from a handful of businesses that stated that they use self-storage as a business solution. It's been a handful of businesses, so that's what we've heard directly. Indirectly, we've heard that many businesses use these facilities. We have tried to get more information on the exact number or the percentage, and haven't been presented with data that we think we can work with or make policy decisions on. We've also asked IBC service providers who are familiar with the needs of industrial businesses if they are aware of industrial businesses using those self-storage facilities, and we haven't heard anything
From the
providers. We haven't heard anything that would undermine this proposal. But we are aware that businesses lease these, and we hear that it's on average about 30% of tenants are small businesses. We don't think, since this proposal grandfathers all of the existing self-storage facilities, which is almost like about 240 facilities in the city, and there would still be a considerable amount of opportunity in MNC8 areas outside of IBZs, we don't think there would be any direct harm to any small businesses. But we did, considering that this is a restriction and it might curb some self-storage development in IBZs, we cannot exclude the possibility of maybe a business, individual businesses may have to travel a bit further to access a unit at the price point that they are seeking. Many options, many things could happen, but overall, since we are grandfathering most of these facilities, we don't think there should be a very noticeable effect on small businesses. But then again, this is hard because we don't have any real data. We don't have any hard data to work with.
Is there any roster you have requested from the storage facilities to verify businesses versus individual residents?
We've had conversations, and they
Not
have...
conversations,
Oh.
I'm talking about a listing of rental rosters so that client A is XYZ using X amount of storage to differentiate residents versus, small business.
Right. So we have asked the New York Self-Storage Association to provide this information. Such information isn't public, so we can't find it anywhere, like a
Right.
database that we can find, so it's proprietary.
Right.
And we have heard that from the self-storage industry that it is difficult to create even this information. But there may be, I think there is a representative here tonight who may be able to speak to the difficulty of collecting this information. But we have not received any such information, and that's all I know about this.
In recognition of self-storage facilities being able to occupy a multi-story configuration, including adapting a building configuration on a smaller footprint, the draft environmental impact statement included an alternative that would allow sites up to 20,000 square feet of lot size to remain as of right. What latitude does the City Planning Commission or the City Council have to modify the text proposal? And what other alternatives does the draft EIS allow for text changes?
Well, I think the City Council, there are many ways in which this proposal can be modified. We included two alternatives that we suggested or analyzed in the environmental review and the draft environmental impact statement, specifically also because we concluded that this proposal may have has the potential for a significant impact on the self-storage industry. So we looked at alternatives, and one of those is exempting the special permit is exempting small sites, so sites below 20,000 square feet from the special permit requirement. The other alternative we considered was allowing self-storage as of right, as long as it included 20,000 square feet of industrial ground floor space. So those are alternatives that we included. But of course, ultimately the council is approving this, and changes can be made now or later. we would just have to make sure that the effects of the action, that it's within scope and that the effects of the action are appropriately analyzed.
Why was the scope limited to just self-storage when the industrial conversation began in 2015, looking at what was the hotel as a special permit as well?
Yeah, so we were definitely working on a combined, or not a combined, but it was a joint proposal where both self-storage and hotels would be subject to special permits in IBZs. That was also announced as part of the industrial action plan. More recently, or since the announcement, we realized there were broader issues with hotels that were IBZ related, but had to do, that occurred in all M1 districts or in most M1 districts in the city, that related to bulk and envelope issues that relate to parking, the parking requirements for hotels. Communities in many places are unsatisfied with how hotels have shown up in their communities, and it's not just in IBZs. So a wider range of issues appeared in the meantime, and we decided to take a broader look at all M1 districts, and that since it was then a different geography and a much more expansive geography, that was also much more complicated to analyze in terms of, because some of the M1s are active industrial areas, but there are also light manufacturing districts mapped in Manhattan and other parts of the city where the land use and development context is very different. This meant that it was going to be a more complicated study and research for us. And we separated the self-storage piece because that was essentially ready to go, and we wanted to get ahead with it as much as possible while we are still working on the hotel piece, and that should be following relatively promptly. And we are targeting the fall for a conversation or to come out publicly with the hotel proposal.
For certification, to start.
Well, it's going to be a bit of a longer process, again, because it involves all M1 districts. So, but to start the public process, and that will start with environmental review.
And as far as the storage facilities, not being always within the, or not, strike what I said, should the outcome of this text proposal be adopted without further modification? How does the EIS project project a potential for the proliferation of self-storage facilities in the remaining M1s and C8s that would remain as of right?
If no changes are made, the development scenario projected that the rate of self-storage growth would be the one that has been in the past 10 years. And as you can see, there has been quite a lot of self-storage growth in the last 10 years. We do think that there will be less self-storage facilities as a consequence of the proposed action in New York City as a whole. And this is, again, a small number. I think we're talking about a reduction of a net of 5 or 6 self-storage facilities. These are projections that we did for the purpose of environmental review, and based on the extent of our knowledge. So it's always hard looking into the future. But we don't necessarily project like a proliferation of these facilities in M and C8 districts outside of IBZs, but the ongoing rate as has been in the past. And that would result, I think, in about 8 self-storage facilities per year on a citywide basis in M and C8 districts outside of IBZs.
But do you believe that that's happening because in the non-IBZs, a lot of these sites that were designated M1-2 have been rezoned or gone through what would be a BSA variance? So therefore, the IBZ become more attractive for self-storage facility construction?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. Can you just repeat it one more time?
So the 9-IBZ, there was a volume of self-storage facilities that were being built or developed on sites that were non-IBZ. And then there was a dip on non-IBZs, but an increase in 2016 within the IBZ.
This could be due to a number of things.
What I'm trying to understand is, did your study look at where those M zones used to be, what are they today?
No, we didn't look
Right.
at that.
Okay.
So areas that have been rezoned in the meantime, or that were rezoned in the last 10 years.
Correct, because part of the issue is that there is less non-IBZ areas that are M zoned.
I see what you're saying.
That have become residential zoning. And so therefore, what's the next best thing to do is go into the IBZ, manufacturing industrial. And so if the environmental impact study did not look at further, deeper thoughts into understanding what is causing the shift, to understand 2016 as a clear indication that the shift is moving into IBZ, then we won't really know whether or not there's going to be more, or is there going to be a shift going back into the non-IBZ, if there is land remaining. And so I'm trying to understand, based on what, if you didn't study it, would you know if there's going to be a proliferation in the non-IBZ?
Right. We assumed that the proportion of IBZ versus non-IBZ self-storage development would be about the same as it was in the past, which is about 1 out of 4 facilities on average. But that was based on available information. There, as you see, there was like the slight, there is here the slight trend that more self-storage facilities have been developed in IBZs in the last 2 years. If we look at the pre-construction pipeline, I think there may be about 12 facilities in the pipeline right now that have filed permits at the DOB, and only 1 or 2 of those are in IBZs, I believe. So the pre-construction pipeline doesn't quite look what 2016, 2017 looked like. So the data don't quite say the same thing. So it was hard to know if 2016, 2017 are just recent developments, or if they're an indication of a longer trend. But we usually assume long-term trends are those that will be reflected in the future, not just 1 or 2 year trends, because those can fluctuate more easily. And that is why we said that the future would look similar to the past, and not just the last 2 years.
Okay. Okay. So I thank you, Amanda, for your testimony and the presentation.
You're very welcome.
We will continue to follow up on any other
Yes, please.
questions or further concerns. I'm going to go into the public segment of this application. I'd like to call up Sabine Aronowski from South Brooklyn Accountable Development Initiative. Sabine left. You have her testimony. I will accept her testimony, and we will duly note that she was present. Thank you very much. I'd like to call up Darrell. Darrell, your last name is Holland. Yes. Because I was trying to read this here and I couldn't remember. Industrial Business Account Manager. Thank you so much. Thank you.
How you doing? Good, good, good. Thank you, panel, Deputy Borough President, and everyone. I'm going to be reading 2 testimonies tonight. My name is Darrell Holland. I'm from the Business Outreach Network. The first testimony I'm going to be reading is on behalf of Leah Archibald, who's the Executive Director of Evergreen Exchange. Evergreen is a membership organization that helps nearly 1,200 industrial businesses in North Brooklyn to grow in order to keep the 11,700 quality blue-collar jobs in our community. This represents 14% of the city's manufacturing employment base. We support the New York Department of City Planning's effort to restrict self-storage facilities in New York City's industrial business zones, IBZs, because they drive up industrial land costs and drive out job-rich businesses such as small manufacturers in favor of a much more lower job density use. However, we have to question why the new designated M district where special permits for self-storage will be required does not directly correspond to the North Brooklyn IBZ. Specifically, the southeast corner bounded by Moore Street, Morgan Avenue, Flushing Avenue, and Bushwick Avenue has blocks that are in the IBZ which are not mapped for the new designated M district. This is particularly problematic because that portion of the IBZ includes some of the largest industrial employers as well as several industrial properties owned by Evergreen and offered at below market rents. Exactly the kind of areas that need to be protected from incompatible uses like self-storage. We recommend that the special permit be applied to the entire IBZ boundaries as is the case otherwise for North Brooklyn and virtually all the rest of the IBZs in the city. My contracts are drying up on me, I'm sorry. Manufacturing is alive and well in North Brooklyn, and for the past 35 years, Evergreen has fought to keep it that way. North Brooklyn companies make everything from bespoke suits to architectural steel, from store installations for Park Avenue boutiques to fortune cookies for corner takeout joints. This is a dynamic combination of businesses old and new, traditional and innovative, big and small. But what they create most are good-paying jobs for people who live there. Evergreen serves as their voice in the community and advocates beyond it. We help these businesses get financing, find real estate, access extensive programs, and work tirelessly for the support from city, state, and federal government. Evergreen has worked to keep North Brooklyn booming. As a result, New York City can continue to be a place where actual things and not just ideas are made. North Brooklyn industrial businesses face many challenges. Manufacturing companies' closures and job loss to North Brooklyn and Greenpoint Williamsburg is significantly and disproportionately higher than losses in other parts of Brooklyn and Queens in the last decade. This disparity is the result of additional pressure, i.e. commercial and residential conversion, on industrial firms and businesses in those areas, beyond industrial businesses in other parts of the city. We recently completed a survey of local industrial businesses. Of the 72 companies interviewed, we conducted more than half noted that they were on a month-to-month lease or did not expect their lease to renew in the next year. Because of the high cost of very low 7% vacancy in North Brooklyn industrial areas, we are legitimately concerned about our ability to retain these jobs in our community. I just need another minute.
No, that's good.
That's good?
That's
done?
good. I'm eager to call city planning up
Okay.
to understand this particular flaw.
Okay. 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 I have one more testimony. Oh,
Daryl, just 1 second.
Oh, sure.
Hand the mic over. So, if you could go back to the map.
Daryl was mentioning, I believe,
The edge.
the southern portion of the North Brooklyn IBC. It's incorporated into.
It is
It
incorporated?
is, yeah.
I'd like verification of that by
I-
census blocks.
Okay.
Okay.
There is a detailed map also on.
I appreciate that. I'd like specifically the census block according to the actual street name so that I can verify that it's been included.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Should I finish this Evergreen testimony?
No.
No, go to the next one?
Yes.
Okay. That Evergreen testimony is an overview of what's going on in the IBZs and how it's being affected. This is an example of, I'm the industrial business account manager for Brooklyn East of 2 industrial business zones, Flatlands Fairfield Industrial Business Zones and the East New York Industrial Business Zones. This is an example of what happens to businesses when self-storages move in. The 50,200 square foot and 3,600 unit self-storage Fox facility at 5601 Forster Avenue in the Flatlands Fairfield IBZ is a strong example of the displacement storage facilities create for small industrial manufacturing businesses, and one of the defining reasons that special permits to erect a storage facility in any one of the city's 21 IBZs is paramount to the preservation and growth of the industrial community as we progress in the 21st century. I stand here today as the previous industrial business service provider from 2006 to 2011 for the Flatlands Fairfield IBZ, and since March 1st of this year, the current industrial business service provider for that industrial business zone. 5601 Forster Avenue was once 3 locations, which included East 56th Street, an East 56th Street address, and a Preston Court address. The photos attached denote 2 of the 3 locations are now 5601 Forster Avenue. During my previous tenure in the FFIBZ, this location housed 2 steel fabricators on Forster Avenue and East 56th Street, and a commercial distributor and shipping company on Preston Court. The 4 companies employed a total of 20-plus living wage jobs for local residents, and most raising a family. A salient point is this storage facility, occupying 4 times the space of the previous tenants, only employs 20% on average of the employees the manufacturing businesses carried. Storage facility jobs are not middle-class wage jobs. They pay about $25,000 a year. On the other hand, the average wage for a manufacturing job is more than double that at nearly $52,000 and is more likely to provide health insurance, benefits like health insurance. Limiting storage facilities in the IBZs are part of the city's 2015 industrial plan to preserve the integrity of the industrial areas. Unnecessary pedestrian foot traffic and higher rents are a few of the unwelcome byproducts in industrial areas due to the presence of big box company storage facilities in the IBZs. Requiring by establishing a special permit with stringent guidelines for storage facilities in IBZs will dissuade the encroachment of any non-industrial manufacturing concern in a designated New York City industrial business zone. This is the start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Darren.
you. I'd like to make just one other quick comment. As far as storage facilities, I worked with hundreds of businesses over the last 10, 15 years I've been in this. I've only found one that actually stored their product there. There has a thing, when you keep something in a small business, the shelf life lessens the amount that the product is worth. I think that this idea that storage facilities are used basically by businesses is something that has been fabricated by proponents for self-storage facilities. And I can assure you that if you were able to get a tenant list, you would see that most of these self-storage facilities are used by residential people that don't live in community. They come from other communities where they pay higher rents, and they bring them into where these storage facilities are. So that's the only point I wanted to make about that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony. I'd like to ask Ari Goldman from Self-Storage Owner. Thank you. Self-involved.
Someone left their glasses? Darryl? Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Ari Goldman. I am the co-founder and vice president of Safe and Lock Self-Storage. Safe and Lock employs 21 people at its offices on East Chester Road in the Bronx and creates hundreds of jobs for each of its self-storage developments throughout the city, including several in Brooklyn. Make no mistake about what city planning is proposing here. This is a ban on self-storage. The time-consuming, unpredictable, and unusual discretionary process makes it impossible for developers to secure financing or to provide investors with an accurate timeline for construction. City planning states in its scoping document, CPC special permits present a disincentive to the development of self-storage development facilities, since obtaining the special permit can add significant time, cost, and uncertainty to a project. According to city planning, IBZs represent nearly 50% of available development sites. Banning self-storage in these areas strangles an industry already severely restricted in where it can develop. The remaining half of available land, which are M-zoned and CH sites, are filled with unsuitable sites. As a result, Safe and Lock Self-Storage will likely shut its doors. You cannot be a self-storage developer in a city that bans self-storage. Over the last several weeks, we have heard many different issues raised in the community boards about self-storage and IBZs, reflecting the disparate views in various geographic parts of the city. Clearly, this is a lot more complicated than city planning has proposed. Self-storage is a driver of economic activity in New York City. It provides affordable warehousing and convenient logistics for businesses that cannot afford large warehouses, and provides working-class and middle-class New Yorkers living in small apartments with storage that is otherwise unavailable. According to a recent citywide survey, a 1,000-unit self-storage facility supports 300 local businesses, 47% of which are owned by women or minorities. These businesses are our most active customers. They occupy the largest spaces, and more than 2/3 of them access their units daily or weekly. It should come as no surprise that the Queens, Bronx, and Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce have all come out in opposition to this text amendment on behalf of more than 5,000 businesses. Banning self-storage represents less than 2% of the IBZs, will not bring a single manufacturing job back to the city. However, it will make it harder for manufacturers and other businesses to survive in this already difficult business environment. It will pave the way for other non-manufacturing uses like nightlife, entertainment, truck depots, and tow pounds. Vacant and dilapidated sites will remain community eyesores for longer periods of time. Working-class New Yorkers and small businesses will be forced to pay higher self-storage rates because competition will have been eradicated. The demand for self-storage is at an all-time high with more than 90% occupancy in most facilities throughout the city. We are seeking a compromise. City planning says they want to preserve large sites near truck routes for manufacturing while allowing self-storage developers to continue to build elsewhere. Then why require a special permit for all sites? Why not allow as-of-right development on sites of 50,000 square feet or less in IBZs, and for larger sites require that self-storage developers allocate space to manufacturers? This would truly meet the city's objectives on creating space for industrial businesses while maintaining suitable opportunities for the self-storage industry. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Goldman, how many self-storage facilities do you have?
We are developers. We have about 10 in certain development processes.
And
some are open, some are in construction, and some are in the permit process.
And so there's a total of 10, including those that will be developed?
Yes.
And so you're trying to be grandfathered in?
We actually have 2 in the IBZs that we do have permits and that we are working towards the foundation. So hopefully we'll have the foundation in before.
And what are the 2 IBZs?
East New York and Eastchester in the Bronx.
And why not go to a commercial district?
A commercial district?
Mm-hmm.
You mean outside the IBZs or?
Well, you don't have to build self-storage on an M zone. You could go to a C zone.
A C8, only a C8. Those are usually much smaller lots. We have to have a certain size lot size, and they're very difficult to find for the right size on the right street for a self-storage facility.
And so you have what would be 2 in the IBZ out of 10,
3. 1 has already been completed.
which is where?
18602 Jamaica Ave. That was actually one of the ones that you showed. Yeah, you keep on showing that one. That was actually a vacant land. That was a tow pound.
And so the one in Jamaica, Queens,
Yeah. That's been completed.
which is an IBZ,
Yes.
and 2 more under construction in East New York and Eastchester, Bronx.
Yes.
And in the East New York, was that empty land as well?
Yes. That was vacant land, East New
You
York.
didn't demolish anything?
No. 1690 East New York Ave, if you want the address.
And Eastchester, Bronx?
Was a strip club that closed down. There was a murder there and a fire there, and it closed down about a year ago. And it's been staying on the market since. That we
And then-
demolished.
Right. And then the 7 that you are accounting for as part of the 10 are existing or in construction?
There's one that was completed on 1151 East New York Ave.
Again in East New York,
That's not, but not IBZ.
but not IBZ, on a
There-
commercial strip?
I think it was C8, that one. I believe. I don't remember. It was a C8 or M. And then the other ones are 4 or 5 are under construction right at this time.
Where?
134-31 Merrick Boulevard in Queens. That's not IBZ.
That's not,
Not IBZ.
but an M zone.
M zone.
And
right.
what was there?
That was an auto wrecking facility. That was an auto wrecking facility. It was just had old cars. It was mostly vacant land. Trying to think. 1430 Bruckner Boulevard in the Bronx.
IBZ? No, not IBZ.
Not IBZ.
M-Zone?
M Zone, I believe, yes.
And what was there before?
That was mostly vacant land. It was a car wash that was closed down and two small auto repair shops
Okay.
and a parking lot.
So that's, I'm accounting for 2 of them out of the 5. You're missing 3.
I'm missing 3.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to top them, because those are the ones that are under construction. There's one at 651 Utica Ave. That it was a motorcycle shop.
Was that commercial or
That's commercial.
M-Zone?
I believe that's commercial. We just closed one on 4 Hamilton Parkway. It was a gas station.
Soon we won't find gas stations. So this was, the gas station was on a C-zone?
That's M1
M?
too, I believe.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember the other ones. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That we closed on, because some were in contract. Off the top of my head, how many did I give you so far?
So you have 1, 2, 3, 4.
4, but then there was the original 2.
And then the East New York C8, that's 5. 6 in the IBZ Jamaica,
And
7,
East.
8 East New York and Eastchester.
Yeah, that's the ones that we closed on.
Mm-hmm. And you don't recall the
The
ones
other one-
remaining?
We're in the contract, so yeah.
Okay, I see. So you can't really speak to those 2 in contract?
Right.
Okay.
Until we close on it.
Okay. Are they M zones?
They are, yes, M zones.
Both.
I believe so, yes.
And is it vacant land?
One is vacant land. One is a vacant building that's been vacant for 10 years, probably.
Vacant land is M zone as well.
M zone, yes.
And in that vacant building, is
Well-
it part of the IBZ? It's not part of the
No,
IBZ?
it's not IBZ.
And the vacant building was
Year-
occupied,
No, it wasn't occupied. Years ago, it was a TV studio.
a TV studio?
Yeah, many years ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so all 10 sites will be grandfathered in?
The 2 that we're building now in the IBZs, it all depends on when we get our foundation in and when the potential restrictions come into play.
And why go into an IBZ as opposed to a commercial? You mentioned they're hard to find, but it's not like you're not finding them. You've been successful.
It's taken a lot of work. It's taken a lot, and I'm not finding, now I haven't found anyone past year. It's been very difficult finding sites.
And you mentioned 300 businesses utilize.
30%. So if you take 1,000 unit self-storage facility, approximately about 300 of those units will be used by small businesses.
So the 300 local businesses are who? Like, what type of business?
You have contractors, you have people, local restaurants using for seasonality, you have artists. It's a whole range from like a local plumber to a large corporation like Nike who will come in, who have to ship around the stuff and use the temporary storage for their needs.
Mm-hmm.
Since it is a month-to-month basis, and the larger warehouses, you need multi-year leases to rent.
And do you keep a roster of your leased space storage?
So we're the developers, we're
Mhm.
not the operators.
Mm-hmm.
What usually happens, so I don't have that list.
Mm-hmm.
What usually happens is even the small businesses, what they use it for both their businesses and for their personal, and they have it under their name. We've never really asked if they're a business as opposed to personal, because until this text amendment came in, we never thought of it that way.
But for this particular survey you've
Yeah,
mentioned,
we did a survey of 4 facilities throughout the city about 6 months ago.
and so you purposely did ask
We did ask, yeah.
if they were a business,
Yes.
but this is the first time you've asked?
As far as I know, yes.
And so this particular roster has been made available to the City Planning Commission?
It wasn't a roster, it was, we hired a
voluntary
company.
survey.
Yeah, go out, spend a couple weeks at the facilities.
Is there a
interviewing people.
report?
Yeah, yes.
And that has been shared with City Planning?
I do not know if that's been shared or not.
Have you shared it with our office?
I'm sorry, Melissa's works with.
Yeah.
Hi, so my name,
Just
my
lower
name
it.
is Melissa Barrosi. Do I have to say where I'm from, or?
Lower it. There you go.
Oh, so my name is Melissa Barrosi. We have talked to, I believe we talked to your office. I'm Connolly McLaughlin at Wolos. This is our client, so I think we spoke with you before and had a meeting about it. I do have some testimonies from local business.
I'm referring to specifically a report regarding the survey.
Regarding the survey, we did, we have a report on it. I believe we shared it with you, but I have it right here if you want to see it.
Sure.
As well. And it also has testimonies from some small businesses that also worked at, who use storage facilities.
Thank you. So this isn't speaking to the,
This is the report I'm speaking about.
right, that's not a report. Those are just statistics. All right, thank you.
The backup, if you could provide the backup.
Yeah, I can have.
That would be great.
Can you give me the exact email address?
We'll give it to you afterwards. Absolutely. Fantastic. All right, so I appreciate the information. I just wanted to understand. It seems like you represent the 2016 spike.
No. The one that we opened in Jamaica opened in 2015.
Okay.
And there was nothing that we did that opened in
Okay.
2016.
All right. So I was trying to understand whether or not,
Yeah,
The 10
that's
sites.
That's the first time I've seen that,
Yeah.
that slide.
all right. I appreciate, the opportunity to just be able to understand comprehensively your model and what you've impacted in the landscape of what is M zone versus C zone.
And can I just add one more thing? I think Darrell said,
Raise your mic.
oh, I'm sorry,
Ari.
to add one more thing. When I look at a site to see if it's suitable, I only look at a 1.5 radius to see the residents around there, because that's probably 8% of our population comes within 1.5 miles of our site. So it's very local. It's very rare that I would think that someone from Manhattan is going to drive 30, 40 minutes or an hour to come to a facility in Brooklyn. And I don't put that in my model at all. It's all within 1.5 mile radius.
So where are Manhattanites storing their goods?
Manhattan Mini, I guess. I don't know.
So I thank you for just being clear as to where your business has developed and the opportunity to express who is your active storage facility user. I have other individuals that we're going to call up
Sure.
at this
Thank
time.
you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to call up Armando Mort Chapeloquen from ANHD. Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's for you as well. Oh, sorry.
All right. I kept checking my clock if I should say good morning, but we're not quite there yet. So Good evening, everybody. My name is Armando Moritz-Pelican. I'm with the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development, also known as ANHD. I provided written testimony, but there's been a lot of back and forth at this point. I just wanted to kind of weigh in on some of the questions because I think there's a really lively discussion that's been happening already. And I think that just one of the general themes I want to focus on throughout the course of my testimony is just the fact that this has been a very long haul and a very long process. And I think that in multiple spaces, whether it was in an earlier borough board meeting where members of different community boards were here speaking, there were some concerns that were raised there. So part of what I want to state right now is kind of to those concerns. And one of the things that I think is important just to remember, kind of pulling back from all of this, is the fact that this conversation on a special text amendment or a special permit for self-storage is not the beginning of the conversation, nor is it really the end of the conversation. There was a timeline that was up earlier that started with the November 2015 announcement about the Industrial Action Plan, but in reality, there's been a lot of discussion on use group reform and tightening up the M zones for years before that. And it really is to the City Council's credit on taking leadership on this issue. Deputy Borough President Reyna, when you were in the council also, I mean, I know you're very familiar with this issue, so even just in the context of how far we've come on this process of tightening up use groups, especially in the industrial business zones, it's a really crucial task that is really something that is years in the making. Specifically, I mention that because I don't want it to seem like that self-storage is being specifically targeted on this, because there have been a number of different conversations, and even the point that was raised earlier about hotels, but also industrial advocates, and ANHD is part of a citywide coalition, the Industrial Jobs Coalition, that has highlighted a number of different uses, whether they're hotels, whether it's self-storage, whether it's entertainment spaces, big box retail. The fact is that the overarching problem for a lot of the industrial manufacturing businesses in the city right now is the fact that they can't afford their space. And even with the argument that is being posed that self-storage provides a solution for people who are looking for space to put their stuff, I think the better solution ultimately is that industrial manufacturing businesses would be able to afford their spaces. And the way that we do that is by reducing speculation. And the way that we do that is tightening up the use groups by making sure that incompatible uses or uses that push out industrial manufacturing businesses aren't able to go in especially the industrial business zones. One of the other concerns that was raised that I just wanted to respond to quickly with my remaining time is the fact that there's the concern that by creating a special permit or even a restriction on self-storage in the industrial business zones, that you're going to see a flood of self-storage in other neighborhoods, in the M zones or C8s outside of the IBZs. New York City isn't the first place to be trying out some sort of restriction or tightening of use groups, and whether it's, just to look at the list of cities that I have here, whether it's Chicago, San Francisco, or even Strongsville, Ohio, they have restrictions in place. They haven't seen the sky falling down. They haven't seen self-storage moving into other parts of the city. So I think that we just need to have that robust conversation as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate the leadership that ANHD has been providing around making sure that the industrial manufacturing preservation continues. I'd
be remiss if I didn't just make a quick plug for one of the things that that Leah Archibald typically says, especially when we get together just as a coalition, is just, you know, ANHD historically we've worked on affordable housing, but the reason why we're working on this especially is just because no housing is affordable without a good paying job. And that's really one of the reasons why we're still here tonight. Thank you.
And the last member of the public is Justin Collins, Director of Strategic Partnerships for Southwest. Oh, thank you very much. All right, so this will conclude what is the last member of the public, unless there's anyone else left. I'd like to close this calendar item. And I'd like to thank everyone for their patience and tolerance. I'd like to thank Richard Bayrak, our land use director, Anthony Drummond from our policy unit, and our newest member of the Borough Hall family, Ina Gusenfeld. Right? Good? All right. Land use coordinator. This was her first hearing, and we appreciate all the work she's done. Richard really knows how to break them in. 6 applications in one evening is a marathon. I hope it will never repeat itself. My council days did not need to be welcomed back. So I will conclude by just stating Borough President Adams will review the applications we heard today and will soon submit his recommendation to the City Planning Commission. Borough President Adams would like to take this opportunity to remind you that the City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on this item. This hearing is now adjourned. Borough President Adams would like to remind those viewing on the website that timely comments can be submitted by